Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. This is one of my favorite days of the week, Tuesday afternoon, live at 4. And for those of you who are watching a replay, whatever time of day it is, this is my favorite day of the week because I get to chat with authors and industry experts in publishing, and we just have a great old time. So if you're watching, and we're live, make sure that you pop your questions into the chat. And as we're chatting with our special guest, we'll be able to get to those answers. Well, today we have an author I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and this author just happens to also be in Halifax. It's Donalee Moulton, who is a mystery writer and historical fiction, and sometimes combines the two. And her first mystery book, Hung Out to Die, was published in 2023, followed by a historical mystery, Conflagration, that was published in 2024, so very recent. Her short story, Swan Song, was one of 21 selected for publication in Cold Canadian Crime, and it was shortlisted for an Award of Excellence. Another short story in this series was published in Black Cat Weekly, and other short stories have been published recently in After Dinner Conversation, the Annie Ganesh Review, and Queen's Quarterly, which is forthcoming. Donalee is an award-winning freelance journalist. She has written articles for print and online publications across North America, including the Globe and Mail, Chatelaine, Lawyers Daily, National Post, and Canadian Business. She'll have lots to fill us in on with those. As well, Donalee is the author of The Thong Principle, Saying What You Mean and Meaning What You Say, and co-authored the book Celebrity Court Cases, Trials of the Rich and Famous. Donalee has published numerous poems, short stories, and essays in journals and other publications across Canada and beyond. She lives in Halifax, as I said, happily surrounded by family, friends, pets, and words of all shapes, sizes, and syllables. So if you'll please join me in welcoming Donalee to the author journey. Hi, Donalee.
Great to be here.
Oh, welcome, welcome. And I don't know if I'd read through your whole bio, but pets, what kind of pets do you have? That always captures my attention.
I have one dog that right now is moved from his bed, so I'm not quite sure where he's moved to, and two cats that don't really like the dog. So
there could be some battling in the background there.
There is a welcome territory.
Oh, well, welcome. So it's so good to have you at the author journey today. And, we've got so much to unpack. I love that you have such a diverse background. And you also have taught in communications at my alma mater, Mount St. Vincent University, and are in Halifax.
I was going to say, it's interesting because we were chatting before we went live. For people who like to write, I think the desire to write is often not necessarily restricted to one particular type of writing. So when I was in university, I wrote for the Dalles Gazette, but I did the poetry and the short stories, and then you move into a career. And fortunately, both of us were able to find careers where writing was still central to those careers, both in communications and in journalism. But now I'm trying to do more of the creative and less of the career stuff.
Excellent. And it's a similar pathway. And just as a little sidebar, I'm doing these Saturday sessions on different areas of publishing and writing. And on April 13th, the Saturday coming, we'll be talking about multi-genre writing and how people, hone in on that particular area of, a genre that they want to write. So that's a beautiful segue into these historical fictions. That the most recent one, Conflagration, is a historical fiction, a mystery, kind of a courtroom drama set in the 1700s. So talk a little bit about how did that come about?
Well, and this is one of the things I think that in the freelance world, when I was a freelance journalist or doing more freelance journalism, we would call it gravy. When the editor reached out to you with 2 or 3 ideas, and you didn't have to go looking for them, and you didn't have to pitch them. It just landed in your lap. So my first book was Hung Out to Die, and it's a mystery set here in Nova Scotia. So it's a place I know, it's characters I got to make up, it's a plot that I evolved and developed and played and tinkered with. And I was midway through thinking about kind of book 2 and working on book 2, which is now complete, when my publisher reached out. BWL Publishing has this series called Canadian Historical Mysteries. And there's a mystery set in every province and territory across the country. She had unexpectedly lost her Quebec writer. And as I was saying to somebody, I'm not from Quebec. I don't speak French. I don't do history. I don't do historical fiction. And so, of course I said yes. Right?
Why not?
Exactly.
Yeah. And that, I think that it really speaks to your journalism background, because some people would shy away from that, but you're like, heck, I can do the research.
I think you're right. I think that, you could be writing for, or I could be writing for the Lawyer's Daily on Monday, the Medical Post on Tuesday, the Bottom Line on Wednesday. So going from, law to accounting to medicine. And you got comfortable with the fact that you didn't have to be a lawyer, a doctor, or an accountant, but you had to know how to find those people and how to ask the right questions.
Right.
All that said, though, my publisher was, the mystery is up to you. She had already selected this particular incident in Quebec history in 1734, which is really eye-opening, I think, for Canadians. But her one kind of criteria was the history had to be accurate.
Accurate, right.
Right. I couldn't change the outcome. I couldn't put words into this woman who was on trial. I couldn't put words into her mouth. I couldn't do things that didn't in fact happen.
But can you explain just a little bit about, like, a little of the plot line?
Absolutely.
Because it's really quite fascinating. And I just finished it yesterday. I was very happy to have finished it before. And it wasn't a part of history that I was familiar with. So I was still on the edge of my seat, like, until the end. But talk a little bit about the plot line.
I think that the point you raise is an important one. This story follows a case of arson in 1734. An enslaved Black woman, Marie-Joseph Angelique, is accused of burning down the lower town in Montreal, basically the merchants' quarter. It's burnt to the ground. Nothing survives. Within 24 hours, she is accused, arrested, and tossed in jail. And then becomes a very lengthy and in-depth trial to see if she is or isn't guilty. And because it is a court process, it's all documented. The depositions, the witness testimony, the writs, all of these kinds of things are there to be accessed. But it also drives home, from a Canadian perspective, the extent to which slavery was part of the fabric of early Canadian history and the economy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that was one of the questions that I had, because there's so much detail. Where do you research these kinds of documents, like 1700s court recordings?
It's interesting. This was a double research thing for me. So while on the one hand, many of us have not heard of Angelique, and certainly when we were in school, we didn't discuss slavery as an issue in Canada, except the Underground Railroad, right? When we were looking in a good light. In this particular case, Angelique is fairly well known in certain circles. There is a plaque erected in her name in the old town in Montreal. The National Film Board has done a documentary on her. There have been books and films done on her. So there's a lot of information out there, and all of these records are available at the Montreal Archives in French, of course, but they are available. There is a website for educators called Truth and Torture, which sounds awful, but its intent is to help teachers, help students delve into history accurately and with some kind of rigor. And they have provided all of the documentation from the Montreal archives, and they've gone to the trouble of translating it. Bless their hearts.
Wow.
Freely available. Now,
Awesome.
to your point about the journalism background, I still wanted to check sources where I could, but yeah, no, this was immensely helpful, especially because I don't speak French.
That's incredible. And you chose the point of view of the court reporter, Philippe. So what made you choose that particular character for the point of view and in first person?
Well, and I think there were a number of factors. This is a very sensitive subject. There's even a disclaimer at the front of the book. And I certainly didn't want in any way, shape, or form to be purporting to speak on behalf of Angelique, right? So the reality in 1734 was that the only people who would have been involved in the trial, the judges, the king's prosecutor, the court reporter, even the jailer, they would all have been male and they would all have been white, right? So in order for my character to have access to the process and to the information, and I wanted him to have that because I wanted him to have clues, he would fall into those two groups.
And I love the relationship between the jailer and Philippe. Giolier, how did you pronounce his name? How would you pronounce his name?
You know his name, which I would have said Giolier.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Is actually French for jailer.
Oh, Giolier.
Old French.
Okay.
For jailer, yeah.
And was he actually the jailer? Was that the name of the jailer, or was that part of the fictional? Okay.
There is a jailer that lives in the jail that would have been there during Angelique's time. And he is mentioned, he will bring her to the court and back. I created a secondary made-up jailer who could feed information to my main character. But it's an interesting point you raised because, and this happened in my first book as well, I thought, well, the jailer will have very little role. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe the jailer will have a little bit more of a role because he could be a conduit for information. And then all of a sudden, this stereotypical character starts to take on dimensions and has elements to him that I never expected. And then this friendship arises and didn't see it coming.
And you know what? I love that. I love that you said that because I always say, you know, you can plot out your entire book, but your characters will start to dictate what happens, right? I'm working on a manuscript right now for my next mystery. And there was one character who was very, you know, had a little bit of a secondary character in the first third of the book. And I was going to kill her off. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So in the back of my mind, like she's yelling, please don't kill me, right? She has a bigger role to play.
It is the strangest thing. There's at one point in the book, the jailer says something or does something. He likes to thump his hand a lot. And I thought, you know what? I actually like this fellow who wasn't supposed to be anything really except, you know, a messenger, all of a sudden is taking on a life of his own. And for writers, as you know, that's a wonderful thing to happen, but it's also one has to listen to that voice, right? Like you don't want to cut it off and say, nope, I've decided that the character is going to fit into this box. You have to say, okay, let's go with it and see where it'll take us.
And you mentioned your publisher. So shifting gears just a little bit, you're traditionally published and it's BWL. Is that the name?
BWL Publishing out of Alberta.
Oh, excellent. And so how did that relationship come about? So they published your first book as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they did. The hunt for a publisher is probably more difficult than trying to land on Venus, right? And I didn't realize when I started this how not only how difficult the process was, but how selective and restrictive the process was, so that half the publishers easily that I went to visit their websites, they were either closed to submission or only took agent submissions. And
Right. Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay, well, then that leads you to the question, do I want an agent, and do I want to indie publish, and do I want to mainstream publish? But I do belong to the Crime Writers of Canada, and they put out a newsletter, and they will say congratulations to, and they will list members, and they'll give us a little bit about their book and their publisher. So I made it a point to kind of go visit all the publishers' pages, because some publishers only want literary fiction, or some publishers only want children's literature. And BWL came up a number of times. And so I thought, well, I will try them. I will send it off. And I got a lovely little letter back saying, yes, please, we are interested. Send the full manuscript, which I did. And we just took it from there.
That's wonderful. And that was Hung Out to Die.
Hung Out to Die.
Yes. And what a great little turn of phrase there at the end. And you mentioned some really important points there. When, an author is looking for, the right pathway for them. The research is so critical, and like reading the submission guidelines and giving them what they want.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think in the desire to see the book that you spend all this time working on, the desire to see it out there in print in the world where people can read it, we sometimes don't listen to that voice that says, slow down, just take a beat, because you want to land on the right place for you.
Absolutely. And I had a little listen to your interview on Crime Writers of Canada. And, it was really quite fascinating. And talk a little bit about, so again, with the publishing pathways, and we talked a little bit backstage about the challenges of, getting the word out. Did you line up that interview? Like you're out there, you're doing interviews. Like how did that evolve, and what kind of involvement do you have?
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things, I must admit, that surprised me. I thought that what happened was you wrote a book, you got a book published, and then your publisher set everything up that there was to set up, and all you had to do was lie back with your margarita and
and smile.
Exactly. And nothing
for my close-up.
Further from the truth, as you know, right? Especially because my publisher's in Alberta and I'm in Nova Scotia, so writers want to have a local community too. So I thought it was very important for me to be out here and to be visible. So my publisher launched it, and I did a launch here in Nova Scotia, which was wonderful. But it leads to other things. So somebody then says, well, I have a blog. And I think, oh, I should be thinking about blogs. So then you start to look at blogs that are in your area and reach out to them, right? And somebody said, well, I have a book club. Would you come to my book club? And I thought, oh, book clubs, right? And so there's an organic evolution. And some things work wonderfully and some things don't necessarily work as well as you'd hoped. But my publisher has always been great about saying, what you're doing is you're creating an awareness of you and your work. And so at this point, don't worry about sales. It's not about how many books go off the shelves. It's about, how many people, when they hear your name, go, oh yeah, no, she writes.
Yep. You're establishing your author brand, you're creating your platform, and, assuming that you're just going to continue writing, then, people who have read one book, they want to read the next one. And, yeah, I think that's very, very good advice and well done. And what are you working on now?
I'm doing two things at the moment. So I have just Riel in Hung Out to Die, the main character, is wonderful. but he is not what I would have thought of as a main character for me. Interestingly, I have two books. Both of the characters are male, and
Mm-hmm.
neither of them share a background with me. So the next book is three women who meet in a yoga studio, and a crime is committed, and they come together to help solve the crime. And I've got a sequel started to that one, but I've also started, in part because of the Crime Writers of Canada, and also just in part because once you seem to open the gates to writing creatively, you want to explore all of the options. I've started a series of short stories that right now are only superficially connected in terms of character, but maybe more connected in terms of what's going on in everybody's life.
And one of which you have been shortlisted for a 2024 Derringer Award.
I have, yes. Yeah, that's thrilling.
Congratulations. Yeah. That's pretty incredible.
It's an interesting, to your earlier point about how do you do these things? I mean, you don't want to spend every moment of every day occupying yourself with the possible opportunity that, you could garner some awareness of your writing. But a couple of years ago, the Crime Writers of Canada celebrated their 40th anniversary. And so they decided to put out an anthology. And so they put out a call that said, enter a short story. And there were some parameters around the short story, including the theme. And the theme was cold. It could be a cold case. It could be two people who didn't like each other and they had an icy relationship. And as I think I said on my recent interview, I just took the easy route. I said cold
weather.
And I had spent a
and
lot
we're
of
in Canada.
up north. So I set my story up north in a fictional chief of police and new staff. And I wrote that and it got accepted. I would only have written it because there was an opportunity to get into this very specific one-time anthology that was never coming back. Awesome. But once I wrote that story, a number of people commented on the fact that it was set in a Iqaluit, and nothing seems to be often set up north. So I did write this second short story, which also got published and is now up for the Derringer. But if the first domino hadn't fallen, the second domino
wouldn't have.
Never have written.
Now, you're right. You're riding the wave that has begun because there's a new detective series with Jodie Foster that I wrote. That's up north. It is riveting and a little unsettling in parts of it. But did you prepare like a little excerpt that you wanted to read, or are we?
Absolutely, if you'd like. But I would like to read it if I could from Conflagration.
Oh yes, please. Yes, please.
And part of it is with, as you know, with any book, you don't want to give anything away. At the same time, you want to settle into the story. So much of this hinges on the fire. So I thought I'd read the little excerpt that happens when the fire begins. So this is the night of the fire.
Okay, perfect.
The soldiers are beating a warning on drums that can be heard throughout the streets. Soon troops are running through town, buckets, ladders, shovels. The town crier can be heard in the distance. He says only one word over and over and over: fire. My boots are on and I am heading out the door. It is the law. All able-bodied men must report to the scene of the conflagration to wrap around my mouth. The smoke is starting to fill the streets, and it will be intense the closer I get to the blaze. I turn to kiss my wife goodbye. Madeline has a shawl on. Where are you going? I ask. With you. Absolutely not. You can't fight a fire. But I can help those in distress, she says. With that, my wife and my unborn child are out the door and heading down Rue Saint-Antoine. I look at her retreating back, proud and perturbed. We follow the crowd, the drums, and the voice of the town crier to Rue St. Paul. The street is in flames. The De Berry house is consumed. It was only yesterday I stood inside that home, admired its design and its furniture, spoke with its owner. We form a brigade. Bucket after bucket after bucket of water is passed and poured on houses that line both sides of the street, to no avail. In less than 3 hours, it is over. The fire has won. More than 40 homes are gone, reduced to black ash, burnt stubs of wood, and tar from the water that was tossed everywhere in a futile attempt to squelch the flames. Also burnt to the ground, again, is the convent and hospital. The sisters who run this are outside helping those who have sought refuge. A few buildings remain to offer sanctuary, including a private courtyard, a small chapel, and a garden. People gather here at what is often considered to be the heartbeat of Montreal. Mercifully, no one is seriously hurt. No one has died. But families are without homes, their servants and slaves displaced, businesses destroyed. I see the panny slave from the Debarry house and the servant girl who answered the door. They are drinking tea. Others are drinking sweetened brandy. They all look past me. Neighbors and nuns are handing out blankets and offering comfort. Fortunately, the night is mild, wrapped now in a layer of damp smoke. I look from across the street at the human remnants of the fire, at the sisters who scurry to lend aid, at the neighbor woman who holds a child while its mother consoles another. I lock eyes with the neighbor woman through the heavy haze. I know those eyes. They belong to my wife. We start to make our way home slowly. Our bodies are heavy. Our hearts carry the same load. I have never experienced a fire like this. We have been warned, of course, but those warnings pale in comparison to the reality. There is solace only in knowing that we did all we could as a community. I wonder, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, if we did all we legally could have done. But that is a question for another time. Now is the time to mourn what has been lost. I hold Madeleine's hand. We are about to leave Rue St. Paul behind us when we hear the banging of the drums. Francois Roy, the town crier, has an announcement. It is perhaps more devastating than the debris and ash that surround us. Marie-Joseph Angelique, black slave of Madame de Francheville, set the town of Montreal on fire, he cries. Before there is time to think, to absorb this news, a man in the hospital courtyard turns to the slave woman at the center of the firestorm. He too accuses her of setting the fire, insisting everyone knows this. I see people nod their heads. I anticipate there will be trouble. There isn't. Marie-Joseph Angelique confronts her accuser. There's no vacant stare, no deference here. No one, she says, would be so stupid as to light their own home on fire. There is merit in the argument. I wonder if it is an argument that would win out in a court of law. I will soon find out.
Ooh, that was a great excerpt to read. That's wonderful. And Angelique does really come across as a very strong and determined woman, and no spoilers, so but yeah, she, even though she appears in the story irregularly, it's still, she's still quite a presence for sure. And I also wondered, we're pretty almost out of, I can't believe we're like almost at 30, but I really do like the relationship between Philippe and Madeleine, and you mentioned her in this excerpt, and she's with child. Were there historical figures in your research that inspired them, or like, did they just come to you?
Aside from the witnesses, for the most part, there was not a lot of women that featured in the history, which in hindsight makes sense. It was written by men when men, had the jobs and had the power. Although many of the women that are in the book, such as Madame de Francheville, she took over running the business after her husband died. So there is strength in many of the women that do appear. But no, there was not a lot of relationship information about many of the characters, aside from the two de Franchevilles.
Mm. Well, it's a great book. I really enjoyed it, and I'm so happy that we were able to get you on the author journey, and hope we'll get you back when you have finished reading the next one. Is there a working title that you want to share?
The first one in the series is called Bind.
Bind. Okay, well, we'll be watching for that. And then I want to bring up your website just one more time. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you or learn more, it's donnalee.moulton.com. And also, here's the website. There it is with all your books. And there's also, your books are on Amazon, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, and there we'll just bring that up quickly and share that with everyone. So again, Donnalee, I'm just gonna take that off. And thank you again for joining us. It was such a pleasure chatting. I can't believe how quickly that went.
Oh, how lovely to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you all for joining us on this week's author journey. I hope you enjoyed the discussions with Donalee Moulton of her historical fiction based on a true story, Conflagration, and her first mystery, How Not to Die. And please watch for her new books coming out. And join us again next week on the author journey. I'm Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing. Happy reading and writing, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.